Awesome. How are we doing today? Good. Okay, perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, welcome to Coding for the Senses. This is a talk that I've been putting together for the past few months, and it's one that is really special to me, and you'll get to see a little bit why. So, I don't know about y'all, but I love a good, healthy dose of nostalgia first thing in the morning. I know it's already 11:30, but we're going to pretend it's first thing in the morning anyway. Who remembers late 90s, early 2000s, when we wanted to customize every single aspect of our lives? Like, it wasn't just digital, it was physical as well. Of course, we had our spaces like MySpace that were everybody's corner of the internet. Who was on MySpace, even though maybe they shouldn't have been because they were in the 7th grade? Gotcha, same. But it was also having this really cute tech that we had, and I just talked today about the best way to get me to buy something is to make it purple. It does not matter what it is. Once it comes in my favorite color, it's mine and it's getting in the cart. The thing is, we had this lovely customizable technology, and at some point, we started to morph into each other a little bit. If everybody held up their phone right now, I guarantee you most of them are going to look the same or have the same look and feel. The same way that we used to buy ringtones. Everybody wanted their ringtone to be their favorite song or the song that best described your mood. And now everybody has the same ringtone, and I'm pretty sure for 90% of us that is no ringtone at all because it's on silent. So that thing is, that spark and that drive that we had to take a generic space and really make it our own is what is embedded into our DNA as developers. There were some extravagant sites on the web in the early 2000s, late 90s. Were they always the most accessible? No, but what they did do well is they were really good at pushing their creativity to the limits with the limited resources that they had. Today, we still have that spark, but sometimes as more professional engineers in our day-to-day work, it starts to look a little bit more like this. We start to see how design systems that come, they're nice, they're clean, they're practical, they're flat, they're modern. We love that. This is a productivity app that is probably similar to one that you have seen or maybe interacted with before. It gives you the time, you can put your tasks in, do your Pomodoro, it's functional. But what if instead of just having something functional at its base, we tried to build a little bit of a world around it? And what if we took that same creativity and energy that we had in the early 2000s, late 90s, and put that into something that looks a little bit more like this? So the difference between these two apps is not going to be the functionality. It's going to be the feeling and it's the experience. This is a productivity app where you can roll dice as if you were in Dungeons and Dragons and make your chores that you have to do a big quest. So what we're going to do today is talk about a case study that I've been working on or thinking about of how do we engage every single one of our senses, our sight, sound, hearing, taste, smell. How do we incorporate all of those when it comes to building full web experiences and not just websites? So the first one that we're going to get started with today is going to be the one that I'm pretty sure most of us might think about when it comes to building for the web, and that's going to be sight. Now, the web currently has a lot of 2D action going on, but I'm sure for most of us, we have at some point felt the limits of 2D. I don't know about y'all, but have you ever tried to buy any version of furniture online? Because I will not be stepping into a furniture store anytime soon. But the hard part is trying to figure out what perception it is and what that's actually going to look like in your space. It does not matter if I measure something 2 to 3 times, like my dad said. When it gets to my house, it is either going to be way too big or way too small. There is no in between. So we have started to build our tools with our foundational HTML and CSS, and what's happened is we sort of built ourselves into a box of a 2D document, if you will. But as the world has evolved, the way that we perceive web experience has also evolved, and we have to keep up visually. Now, the technical problem for us as developers is how do we build immersive places instead of just flat pages? Ooh, that's hard. Pages and places. We want to get off the page and we want to start building places. So a few seconds ago, like I shared, I built a proof of concept, if you will. It was almost a go with me of building a Dungeons and Dragons style app. And I called it Epic Endeavors because if anybody is a little bit like me, sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to get to do the things that you already, have to do. So in this app, you basically roll 3 different dice to determine what you're going to work on, how long you're going to work on it, and then of course you need multipliers to get points for the things that were already on your to-do list anyway. Now, it is still functional like the first version that we saw, but this one is just a lot more fun for my brain. The way that we're able to do this is by building a React app, but it's using something called React 3 Fiber. And React 3 Fiber is a 3D renderer for the animation library that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, which is Three.js. And this basically allows us to build a scene in the same way that we would build our React apps. Now, I am no 3D modeling expert just yet, but I can still use the principles that it's already given me and helper libraries to build something that's fun and creative and build this experience. So the foundation of React 3 Fiber is the scene itself and the canvas. So just like in React, we have a root div, React 3 Fiber gives us a root canvas component. And inside of that, everything is going to be a component, and you can use it in the same way that you would think about modeling a React app. There's no complex rendering loops, and all we have to do is declare exactly what we want to see. So for instance, if we wanted to build out the room, like I have a dungeon-style room that my dice are in, this is going to use the base mesh component, and then I just have to define some geometry and give it maybe like a plane for a floor or determine a texture for how it looks, and then place it, and I all of a sudden have a nice 3D looking room. So the dice that you see are also built in a similar fashion. Did anybody hate geometry like me? Yeah, the first time I tried to build this, I was trying to figure out the geometry of putting a 20-sided die together. No, that was stupid, because there's actually a library, a helper library with React 3 Fiber called Drei that has a ton of geometry elements that do this for us. These are also actually built with React, so they're components that can have their own props. You can think about those like color or texture, and they also have their state and animation, whether it's rolling, randomly generated numbers. So this is really powerful for state-driven events, and it's also great for those of us who don't like geometry, but it allows you to really put your creativity to the test and see what you can build with those basic building blocks and not needing to be an expert necessarily in 3D animation. But what happens when you want to have a little bit more fine-tuned, granular control, and maybe you want to dive into that animation a little bit more? What we have is a manual render loop that you can use that works with React. So this is going to be the useFrame hook, and it's actually really helpful when you want to have that fine granularity in determining what your elements are actually going to do. This gives you the ability to use the a scene state and its time deltas so that you can be very specific. So let's say you want something to spin continuously, or maybe you want something to react to the physics in a certain way. You can define that, and you don't have to do a lot of extra work. It happens in the hook itself, so you don't have to do a lot of that extra manual labor. And while building apps like this is a lot of fun, and I will always go on a little creative coding quest, you might be asking, nobody's building Dungeons and Dragons dice interactions for their regular life and regular work. But this 3D animation is actually revolutionizing how we interact with the web today. So it's powering the next generation of e-commerce. We don't really have to think too much about whether something's going to fit in this space as much anymore, because applications and e-commerce applications like Amazon are making it easier for us to see these 3D objects in our own spaces. It's also revolutionizing education and making complex engineering or anatomical concepts a lot easier and more accessible. And it's also starting to transform industries like real estate and hospitality. Has anybody purchased an apartment or gone on an apartment tour recently? Maybe? Yeah, okay. If you can see what the apartment looks like online, it's going to be easier for you to determine whether you actually want to go down the road of potentially viewing it in person, or maybe let's say you want to go to a hotel and you're going to be spending a lot of money. You want to see what it looks like and you want to experience what it feels like before you get there. So by moving from pages that are just flat to places, We go from not just creating fun visuals to providing tools that allow us to have a deeper understanding, greater confidence, and also making knowledge more accessible than ever before. So we've seen how we can build these large immersive worlds for our users to see, but the world is not just for seeing, it's for interacting with. And the way that our user interfaces respond to input, whether it's our clicks or our taps or our drags, that's really what is important to creating like a sense of life. And that is what is going to lead us to our next sense, which is touch. So think about the last time that you went to a shopping cart checkout. Maybe you were gonna make a little bit of an impulse purchase, you have everything in the cart, you have your card in there, it's queued up, you hit complete purchase, and nothing happens. The button doesn't move, you're just sitting there, and this is honestly a lose-lose situation for a ton of different reasons. For you as the user, you're sitting there and you're like, oh my gosh, did it actually charge my card? Is it not working? What's going on? But for that company, they may have just lost a customer because for the 2 seconds that it took to respond, I don't need that PS5 anymore. I've thought about it and I am removing it from the cart. So what actually happened here is a broken promise, and it's called a bad digital handshake. That tiny moment of unresponsive feedback is broken communication. So these are interfaces that are telling your user, I hear you, I'm working on it, and I understand you, and that's why they're so important. That feedback loop is what's going to be essential for not just telling your users that you hear them, but also for building trust and making your interfaces feel reliable, which is super important. So the challenge here is going to be choreographing a lot of those different precise animations. It can be incredibly complex, especially in React. React wants to own the DOM, and animation library also wants to own the DOM, and if you're not tricky, what you can end up with is a really buggy UI where things don't really work as expected, and that's a lot worse. So we can actually use something called GSAP, or the greenock-animation-platform, and this is a library that is meant for creating high-performance and high-powered animations, and it's great because it can animate just about anything that the DOM can touch. So in the last section, when we looked at the dice rolling, and this is basically happening on a React state change, but what happens for the complex movements itself? As you can see, the dice sort of move out, they do all kinds of spinning, and then they move back. Now, this is actually orchestrated by GSAP itself, and what makes it so powerful is we're not just changing the 3D animations, we're actually tweening direct properties that are on the dice themselves. So this is gonna be things like rotation or its position to make it move out, do all kinds of spinny moves, and then push it back. Now, this mental model is the same one that we can use for our dice, but then also take it from 3D animation and use it in places like animating a button, or maybe take it even further and animate SVG icons that we have. Now, we can also see that there are some more complex animations that we can do by sequencing different sets of animations together. I hope that you can see, maybe a little bit. There's some confetti that comes after every single dice roll as a little, yay, celebration, you rolled a dice and now you have to do your chores. Now, the way that I was able to do that is by having all kinds of little box components made with Drei.js, and what happens is I can just sequentially apply different animations dynamically to each of those individual pieces of confetti to make sure that it's random and sporadic and not all uniform, because then it wouldn't be confetti, it would just be a sad raining of little boxes on the page. Now, this was able to be done with the same mental model, like I said, about using the dice, where you're tweening properties directly for the position, the rotation, and the scale, which makes it feel spontaneous and makes it feel like that nice, happy confetti feeling. Now, what makes this even easier in GSAP is this year they've released their React library, or their React package. So things like the use GSAP hook also make it a lot easier for us to be responsible about creating performance sites when we have a lot of animations as well, because it handles all the setup and cleanup for us. So this level of animation and polish is actually what separates the good sites from the great ones. Does anybody remember doing those like BuzzFeed style quizzes where you go see what golden girl you are, or maybe you go check to see what programming language is best compatible with your personality? I used to spend a lot of time on those. So you can think of this website created by Klook as the same thing, but it doesn't look the same, right? It looks a lot more dimensional. What you're seeing this is a travel quiz, and all of the cards are little individual images that you can scroll through. They took GSAP and also a little bit of Three.js as well, and created a full experience where you're not just looking at the question and the answers, you're working through a whole experience. And in our everyday work, it might look a little bit different, where you're seeing smooth animations that look very, very satisfying and feel intentional for websites. Now, we've seen how updating our app, how it looks and how it feels in response to touch, but another powerful thing in a subconscious layer that I believe that we want to tap into emotions for is sound. And sound has the power to really make our websites more immersive. So I want you to just look at this video super quick and think about how it makes you feel. Oh, did it stop? Okay. Anywho, how did it make you feel? And you don't have to say, but it doesn't make me feel anything. It is just a house. We're walking into the house, we're walking up to it, or whatever. Now, let's try it again, but this one is going to have sound. How'd that one make you feel? That someone's gonna die. Maybe it made you feel a little anxious. Maybe it kind of made me want to back up a little bit, like I'm walking into one of those thriller A24 movies. I'm a scary person, so the music alone would have just made me check out. But you can see how the first one didn't make us feel anything. There was no emotional investment. And as soon as you heard the lead up in this version, you're already starting to feel a little uneasy and a little bit anxious. You're not really sure what's coming, but you've already seen the clip before. That is the power of sound. So I know what some of you are thinking. Unsolicited sound on the web is not a good thing. We are no longer in the days of having a profile song play as soon as you go to a website, and you're absolutely correct. I am not advocating for you just barraging your users with all kinds of sounds that don't make sense. Sound is supposed to enhance an experience, and it should not be a sole gateway. So if your experience doesn't work without sound, it's not accessible, just to go ahead and get that out there. But I think where things are really getting exciting is in the world of generative music. Now, generative music isn't just a fixed MP3. It is a whole system of sound that has the ability to adapt to a user's context, which creates a really reactive and responsive environment. So the app that I created has two individual themes, and I'm going to show you them in a second, that kind of give me N64-ish vibes or retro vibes, but I want you to listen to them, and then we will talk about them shortly. Second one gives me Game Boy Zelda vibes just a little bit, so I am more partial, and I like that one a lot more. But the technical challenge here is having two different themes. We have a light theme for our fairy mode and a darker theme for our dungeon mode. And the technical challenge is that audio is stateful. So what I've done in an audio manager is I have instantiated Tone.js, which I am using to generate this generative music, and I am using just instruments inside of tools that we already know and love with React. A use state or a use effect, and a use ref to keep them nice and balanced. Now, what is actually happening here is we have two distinct synthesizers. Our dungeon synth is playing something that is a little bit lower and gives us a more mysterious feel. And as you could tell, the fairy theme is a little bit more bright and upbeat. But basically, both of these allow us to change the voice of the instrument themselves. So at the heart of generative music is going to be a loop, and in Tone.js, that is called a tone loop. So inside of the loop, what we do is we currently check for the theme, we check to see if it's a dungeon theme or it's a fairy theme, and then we apply a dark or a minor pentatonic scale, and if it's a fairy theme, it's more of a major scale to be more light and airy. But what we're doing is we're randomizing the velocity and duration of all of the notes to make sure that every session that a user has is a little bit different. The notes might feel similar or the same, but the rate at which they are applied and how they're applied is a little bit different. So this means that every user gets to have a unique experience. And if you wanted to take this one step further, you can actually create generative music, like I said, depending on your user's environment, or whether it's daytime or nighttime, or whatever those environmental factors are. The place that you have likely seen this the most is in video games. Video games are excellent with having generative audio that changes based on your character, or where you are, or whatever the environmental factors are. So tools like Tone.js are giving us more granular control of those building blocks of sound, and in doing so, we can compose an unseen score for our applications that have a higher focus. Maybe we want to create like focus music to go with our productivity app. We can also build stronger emotional connections, and we can also make our digital worlds feel actually alive. Now, we've explored sight, sound, and touch, and those are the most concrete that we can code for. Now, I'm gonna need you to go with me here, because when we get to talking about smell, which is our next section, we have to get a little bit more abstract because we cannot currently smell through the computer. So, in thinking about how we can implement or how we can use smell as a sense for building web applications, I have thought of the term called digital-terroir. Now the thing is, smell is such a powerful tool because it has a way of taking you back to specific moments in history in your memory. Does anybody have like a scent that just automatically takes them back somewhere? Like maybe it's fresh cut grass or chlorine from when you were a kid in the pool. And as you can tell, I love a good dose of nostalgia, so this is why it's also one of my favorites. But the thing is, do we have any wine lovers too? Okay. Terroir is a French term used in winemaking to describe that a wine is going to taste of the place that it's been. So the soil that it was created in, the climate, the landscape. And for digital sites, a digital terroir is going to be that unique and authentic feeling that comes from an immersion of those parts. So all of the sound, the touch, the sight, all of those together are what's going to help us make that atmosphere. And it's really going to help shift your application personality, but also strengthen your brand. So this is what I mean. With a single click, we go from having a darker dungeon theme to having a light mode theme. And when we implement sound, also like we did in the last section, that atmosphere really starts to shift through. Now the problem here is that going from one theme to another can be a little bit jarring in React applications. So having it be smooth is something that can be a little bit tricky. But thankfully, we can use a tool called the View Transitions API. Now this is going to be the foundation for how I have set up the styling in my project to seamlessly go back and forth. And as you saw, the transition was a little bit long just because I wanted you to be able to see that the smooth transition was happening back and forth. But basically, the styling in this app was created with Tailwind, and it was extended by CSS custom properties and variables. And then for our React app, what happens when a user clicks on a button to change the theme is a function is going to eventually update that state. And instead of just setting the state, we are wrapping that in a document.startView transition. And the way that that works is before the transition actually takes place, it takes a before screenshot as a static image, and then what it does is immediately runs the code in the callback. So that's when it starts to actually go through and make the changes throughout the page, and then it is going to update the DOM and have an after screenshot. Now the fun part is what happens is a shadow DOM is basically created, and those two layers are like faded into each other to create a more smooth transition. Now the View Transitions API is really great, and it also came with two new pseudo elements that we can use for View Transition Old and View Transition New, where we can get a lot more granular with how we are doing those slides or those fades in between. And now we can start choreographing full atmospheric shifts without just jarring people from one place to another. So why does crafting this digital terroir, if you will, actually matter? The thing is, in today's world where we have a lot of apps that are popping up consistently, it can be the difference in competitive advantage for your brand. A cohesive atmosphere can build a very powerful brand identity. We see places like Notion that have a very strong user base, and that did not happen by accident. They have crafted the atmosphere of their app, and people physically want to be in it. So we've crafted an entire atmosphere, and we've built that distinct terroir within our world, and we've mastered the art of creating a cohesive look, and now we're at our final sense, which is going to be taste. We also cannot taste through the computer yet, just so you know. So this one is also a little bit more abstract. But in thinking about how we define taste, for me, I really believe it's about how we orchestrate all of those other senses together and how we allow them to move. So for us, this is going to be about using something like state management to be able to orchestrate all of those senses where needed. So maybe it is for our site where we have our Three.js scene, or maybe it's going to be for our smell where we're doing that digital terroir and making sure that the atmosphere is good, or maybe when we are doing the touch and making sure that our animations are good, making sure that our entire app can move as one fluid unit when we are shifting from one place to another. I used a state management library that's super lightweight to do this called Zustard. Now, this is really the brain of our entire application because everything happens in one place. We have our current theme, we have our dice roll, and we also have the volume for the audio. And all of these things can talk to each other through the state management versus having to talk to each other directly. So that's also great for us as developers and would give us good developer taste. So why go through all of this trouble of thinking about how different senses can help us build applications? So Sight, for our 3D product viewer, is going to help build purchasing confidence. Touch is going to help us build trust and reliability within our apps. The sound is going to build a familiar habit with people. I know we all have like that one sound that we usually remember a lot on our phones when our phones are turned on, because I know we use them off a lot of the time. And then smell is going to be that atmosphere that creates that cohesive brand that customers actually want to live in. And now, while we are allowing for taste of personality, that's going to build our loyalty instead. Also. So this is how we go from building just like disposable tools to creating full experiences that users are going to want to use for years to come. Now, I just want to go ahead and wrap this up and talk about how we use Sight, like with tools like React 3 Fiber, to transform flat pages into immersive worlds. We also use GSAP to give us precision with animation. We use Tone.js for creating sound, and digital-terroir for atmosphere. And I think I'm running out of time. Yeah, so this talk was not necessarily about 5 different libraries, if you will, but I hope that by now you might think about how we can use those senses to our advantage as developers to create these experiences that make people truly feel and not just experience. People are human beings. We're not just logical beings. We crave connection, and that's no different when we think about web experiences. So if we want to make experiences that people are going to love to interact with and to come back to, we have to meet them where they are and inform those connections. So next time you're doing a pull request, asking, should I do this? Yeah, that's great. But also ask yourself, how should it feel? How should it make the user feel? How should it feel for you as the developer? Is there a way that you can coordinate things a little bit better or make things easier? And I just want to end things off with saying that I want you to respect people's sensory and accessibility preferences. We do not need to have all 5 senses huge and loud in every single app that we create. Thank you.